The Janae stay warm by sleeping with a friend. Commander Riker wants to inspect Soren's variety of plant life. And a warrior does not let a friend face danger alone. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we are doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 5, Episode 17, The Outcast, written by Jerry Taylor, directed by Robert Shearer. This was Pi Day, May 14th, 1992. Also Stephen Curry's birthday. Wardell Stephen Curry, that is. How you doing today, Sirach?
Oh, really? That's his birthday?
Yeah, Pi Day.
Wow, okay. And his first name is Wardell?
That's where his dad got the name Del Curry, because they have the same name. He's junior. So Del Curry's name is Wardell Stephen Curry. He named his firstborn Wardell Stephen Curry Jr., but Stephen goes by his middle name.
Oh, man. That I did not even know this. This is crazy that I'm just learning
If
this.
you ever see him, call him Wardell. He loves it.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, whatever.
I didn't even know he was a junior. That's news to me. Anyways, yeah. So May 14th, 1992.
Okay.
What about this episode, though? I mean, this is
Well, I'll tell you about this episode. Also, the reason Gary Payton II is called Gary Payton II and not Gary Payton Jr. is because his dad, Gary Payton, had two sons right around the same time, called them both Gary, and both mothers used his last name. So one is Gary Payton Jr., the other one is Gary Payton II. Interesting. Kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, now for sure we're going to talk about Star Trek. Everybody, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon for notifications. If you're listening in, give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. We'd really appreciate that. And go visit us on patreon.com, I think. It's a little weird. Patreon.com/the7th rule to be a part of this and support the show. We'd really appreciate that. All right, so this episode, I vaguely remember it. And I was told, don't forget that it's called The Outcast, not Outcast, because when you say Outcast, you think of the band. Yeah. And it's not that. So, okay. This one is interesting for a variety of reasons, a variety of plant life. One of the main reasons, or maybe the main reason, is because Star Trek tackles gender, sex, identity. One thing that it tackles that isn't new is that Riker's down to hump anything, whatever, anytime, anyone. Like, I'll be honest, when this episode started, it already felt like immediately Riker was like, hey, I'm Commander Riker. You know, like he doesn't even like every single alien species he meets, doesn't know anything about them. First thing he does, he's like, hey, so you want to, pilot a ship or do lunch or, what's your name?
Yeah, right. Riker is like the Fonz on Happy Days. Remember the Fonz, the cool guy that it always works out for him, I don't know. This was a good episode for me. I didn't initially think it was going to go where it went.
Mm-hmm. That's what Riker said.
No, because I mean, first of all, it had a short intro. I mean, the open was one of the quickest open. Oh, we're on our way to go visit this androgynous race of the Janae,
mm-hmm.
and and then we're going to do a probe, and the probe disappeared, and then cut, and I was like, okay. They were like, dun dun dun,
low stakes.
Yeah,
it's not like Klingon warbirds are attacking. Oh, I think Data's dead. None of that. It's just like, hey, our probe disappeared in null space. Some theoretical thing.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, like they found a black hole or something. I don't know, whatever it is, whatever the scientific equivalent of null space black hole in my mind. So, but it wasn't that much of a big. And I knew the setup was because they did say we're visiting these androgynous race, so that was like they kind of dropped that in your head in the
Yeah.
beginning with the open. So I'm like, okay, androgynous race probe. I'm like, what's this episode about? You know. And then we see. Oh, you were going to say something?
No, I was just gonna say, yeah,
Oh,
I agree. Like when that happens, you kind of know, okay, it's gonna be one of these exploring humanity or exploring social issues kind of thing.
right.
You can usually tell pretty quickly what kind of episode it's going to be. Now, sometimes it takes a big left turn or big, change in the theme that you think it is, but you could pretty much tell, right? They say androgynous. Um, I was immediately reminded of a Star Trek book that I read, and I think it was the Titan series, where Commander Riker is Captain Riker of the USS Titan. I think that's what it was. And they had an officer, I think it was a medical officer, that they called a hermat. It was a hermaphrodite. And I think it was like dog. It looked kind of like a dog, and it was called a hermat. It was kind of an alien species. Anyway, people in the comments can correct me because I know some of them have read these books and they know what I'm referring to from something I read like 20 years ago. But anyway,
Yeah.
so I thought about that. And anyway, I've got a lot to say on that because Star Trek has dipped its toes in these kinds of subjects before. I would feel like it should have done it way more, especially with alien species. You've got millions of alien species and
You know.
only 4 of them are slightly different. But anyway, back to what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, so then the story starts to unfold, and we begin to know that it's going to be a Riker centered episode fairly early because of the focal point. Usually, um, whoever is going to be the centerpiece of the episode is kind of brought forth in the beginning of the storyline, right, in the early scenes of the episode, and that's where we saw Riker. Um, Talking about working together in the scientific way to explore the anomaly, and so that initially tells us that they're going to be the duo that's going to be problem solving. So that instantly pits them together in a storyline that we're going to see unfold, um, and so there I am saying, okay, let's see how this goes. I thought because it was an androgynous that Riker would have more of the questions, which was interesting because you would think I thought Riker was curious
Mm.
about
Oh,
some
he
things, right?
is.
He was, but it seems like the curiosity was also on the other side too. So
Yep.
even more so. So I like the interplay between them. I like the forwardness or not understanding that some things were being um, finding a way to bridge the communication gap between the two of them. That's basically what I felt like we were watching unfold. So um, Soren,
Yeah.
yeah, so Soren had um, a communication issue because when Soren was asking Riker about his sexual anatomy, he responded in a way that felt and looked uncomfortable, like whoa, like. And Soren said, hey, "Oh, is this not like appropriate, right?" I
Yeah.
mean, and Riker said, "We usually don't talk about this like casually, and in this kind of a way." So what that tells me is communication wise between these two people, species, they're trying to learn how to communicate in a non-offensive way,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Good point.
And so then Riker then also strikes back with his communication methodology when he says, "Well, he must have been a really good teacher," and then he was corrected about the pronoun, and in that way he said, "Excuse me, I'm not used to doing this. It's going to be difficult for me. So please forgive me. I may slip and say here and
He or
there,
she, yeah.
he or she here and there. So I'm not being offensive. And, it's just me trying to get used to the language. And I think that to me talks about a communication between two people that is done on a level in which is not intended to be offensive.
Mm-hmm.
And they've established that by communicating that in a reciprocal way. So I think that was one thing I noticed in the dialogue in those various scenes, was how that was being communicated, how they were understanding each other and trying to learn about each other without
Mm-hmm.
sounding like, it's like anything. You have a curiosity about somebody and their lifestyle or their life choices, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to be offensive when you ask these questions, like how do you pray, or what do you eat, or how do you fast, or whatever the question is that could it be interpreted as offensive if it's not said in the right tone or prefaced by, look, I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm really curious about, you know, the what the differences, what your cultural habits or practices are, or what your beliefs are, what your identity is. And so I think that was well expressed in this episode.
That's funny that you say that, because it actually reminds me of something that I've been accused of or hinted at in the past, especially when it comes to culture, because I'm usually like really interested in that. And sometimes that eagerness might frighten people that are watching. They're like, oh, don't. Like, I remember I had a girlfriend back in the day that got petrified when we went to a party and I met an African dude. He told me his name, clearly had an African name and an African accent. I was like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. What are you from Kenya or what? Like, I kind of tried to pinpoint it, and she was like mortified. Oh, you're not supposed. Don't ask him what part of Africa. I'm still to this day, I'm not sure. Was that really bad? But when he answered, he was super excited. I think he said like that he was, or it was a very close nation to it. And I was like, great. And we talked and we ended up having a great time because I really was fascinated. But
Yeah.
she told me afterwards she was petrified. She's like, don't ever do that again. My heart skipped a beat. But I was like, I love learning about this shit. And how many times am I going to get to actually meet somebody from there that can tell me about it? But anyway, so yes, good point there. And I think that Riker was, jokes aside, the right person to have this kind of discussion, not necessarily just because he wants to hump everything, but because he was able to make this conversation light and friendly and stress-free, which makes it usually comfortable, right? Picard, he'd be like afraid to, he'd have his butt so clenched, his crack would be eating his underwear. He'd be too like scared and too polite, which would put the other person kind of a little stressed. Troy would be too like, oh, and your feelings are okay. And the other person would be like, yeah, I know my feelings are okay. I'm just telling you. Worf would be a dick about it, Whereas Riker is just like, hey, so what is this exactly? Oh, that's it. Well, I'll do my best. That's fascinating. Please forgive me if this or that happens. I mean, I thought that was actually really well written and it was well chosen, delivered. When Soren says, oh, what are the physical differences between men and women or something? And he's like, he kind of gives like a smirk of like,
yeah,
well, you'll find out a little later, maybe, in at least half of them. But yeah, I thought he was the right choice for this kind of storyline, honestly.
I thought you'd never ask. Let's go back.
He's like, God, I had to wait 4 minutes to talk about this. Golly.
Yeah, forget all this science stuff. Yeah. Put it on autopilot. Yeah. but then so I'm figuring it out, and I thought it was interesting that they all had the Dumb and Dumber haircuts. I thought like they just all they need is a different barber on that planet.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is.
Because those hairdos were not doing it for me. Um, but I thought this episode was well written. You know, obviously, I think it must be there. It cannot be even really. Maybe somebody can, out there in the chat can tell us. But is there a earlier mention of gender identity and pronouns being the
In Star
subject
Trek.
matter? Oh,
Yeah, I
not
don't
just
think
Star Trek,
so.
on television. Forget Star Trek.
That's a
Just
good point.
on television in general, um, this particular thing, like what pronoun to use, like this is exactly. I don't think I can predate 1992
I can tell you
on this
one of
this
my
discussion.
favorite, and one of the best science fiction movies, not television. So you're right there because that's a very different kind of medium, especially back then. Movies, you could do whatever you wanted. TV was a lot, more restricted. Now that's different. I feel like it was mid 80s, 85, 86. Enemy Mine. Louis Gossett Jr., Dennis Quaid. For my money, maybe the best sci-fi, my favorite sci-fi movie. And the alien, because it always, it's easy to understand. Oh, it's an alien. It's different. The alien they don't have genders. They don't have men or women. And apparently they just have a baby. It just comes on its own, because I remember the funniest moment in the movie, and forgive me, I haven't seen it in like 30 years, so I could be getting this a little bit wrong, but basically the guy, I can't remember the alien's name, but he says, and I think he called him a he, but he says like, hey, he like kind of shows his stomach, because he was like, oh, what's wrong? Are you sick? What's wrong? And he kind of goes like this, like he's pregnant. And then the Dennis Quaid character goes, what? Well, how did this happen? And he goes, well, don't look at me. Like, his first one, I didn't do anything. But anyway, so what it was is it just, that's what science fiction allows us to do. It allows us to just say, hey, what about this kind of situation? What about this kind of scenario? And it makes it, obviously, we say a lot of times, it makes it a lot easier for us to learn lessons or understand things or expand our minds, because it's an alien or it's 500 years in the future. But as far as television, I can't think of any.
Yeah. And that's what you just said is exactly why I think this is a great episode, because this androgynous character, Soren, who wanted to identify as a woman, was then going to be subject to the kind of psychiatric and abusive treatment that was reserved for people who were not who were on the opposite side of that spectrum, who were at that time trying to be gay or lesbian, and
like
they
the
would have
shock
to go
treatment and the horrible
shock treatment and
yes,
and so hearing that argument from the other side, where it's just a person,
or pray the gay away. That was the other thing.
I mean, all of those things that we've just, measures that are just, in hindsight, hopefully to people is stupid. You know, but when you frame it in this context with this, this race of people with Janai and this Soren character, wanting the freedom to be who she feels like she is, that it speaks volumes to, the core essential principle of the freedom to love, who you want to love, the freedom to be who you want to be, and also the idea of feeling like you are born a way. I think that was one of the lines that was Soren mentioned. Like I was born this way or that.
Ah, shout out to Lady Gaga. I believe that's a Lady Gaga album.
Yeah, so I think a lot of those things is just like, that's why I think this episode is great, because it does what science fiction is supposed to do, which is allow us to think about issues in a different way by holding up a mirror to them in a light that allows you to sympathize with people who are feeling, oppressed, who feel like they can't be themselves, who are feel like societal norms oppress their own right of freedom or individuality. So I think a lot of that is well expressed in this episode.
I'm trying to remember. It feels like the Binars in the first season were kind of like that. Um, I don't remember exactly. Remind us in the comments
Yeah,
below.
I
But I
think
remember
you
they
might be
made
right.
it very difficult to tell which were male and female. And I don't remember if that was addressed, like, we aren't male or female. I don't quite recall. So that's something I'd love to be reminded of. Do you remember?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there was something about um, gender identity in that as well. But this one really specifically, I mean, with the pronouns, I think that scene is specifically talking about that. Um, is an issue where I haven't seen that exact topic brought up.
Right. And
But
also, excuse me, they mentioned, or it was written that when they're talking about the pronouns, he asks Soren. He says, do I do male or female or he or she? And Soren says, we have a third pronoun. Oh, because Riker says, what do I call you? It? That would be rude. Soren's like, then
yeah,
don't do that. But Soren says, no, we have a third uh, pronoun or a name that doesn't translate. And I thought that
yeah,
was great because, of course, they do. Of course, they don't have the same
right.
word that we have. Now, of course, one other thing is we have a universal translator. So theoretically, Soren should not have to translate what that word is. Soren could just say the word and it would translate to something. But this was
Mm.
obviously better this way, I think.
Yeah, I don't know that the translator would have everything in it. Actually,
Right. Well, it wouldn't have a word that doesn't exist. And
yeah,
that's what the
yeah,
situation was. So I think that was better this way.
yeah. But I did think that I thought the questions that were being raised were really great philosophical ones, and the one that specifically was asked to Riker was like, what is the difference between a man and a woman? Right? It was like a very basic question, but you can see Riker like, oh, well, like how do I answer this question? And he answered it in a nursery rhyme, which
Yeah.
was
Puppy dog tails.
yeah, snips and snails and puppy dog tails, and it's almost to some degree remedial in that way how we identify, from like a long time ago, just these kinds of sugar and spice are, Mars. Girls are from, you know what I mean? You know that
Yeah.
that
Girls are from
uh,
Mars, men are from Venus. Is that how it goes?
something like that. I
Maybe it's the
forgot it, but
reverse. I can't tell.
yeah. But you know what I'm talking
Maybe it's
about.
the
That
reverse with Uranus. I don't know.
yeah, no, that's a different nursery rhyme. But the point is, uh, these kinds of remedial ways are how we identify things as children. You know what I mean? It's just like
Yeah.
this and sugar and spice and all these things. But I thought Riker did a great job. I thought you mentioned the sensitivity. I thought he was very sensitive,
While keeping it
and
light and easy.
yeah, and I can see why all the chicks fall for him, because he's kind of like, he's easygoing. He's no pressure. He's pretty open and honest. He's not a deceiver.
Mm,
You know,
kind
I,
of.
I, I Well, not really, because he walked over to Troy, which I was like, poor
That's nothing.
Troy.
And she just kissed him on the lips. She's like, I understand. I was like, what? What? Okay. Hey, we got a lot more to talk about. We got to jump
Yeah,
to our
that's
break right now. But
yeah.
you guys, I got my first non-appearance mention in this episode.
I heard.
Oh man, oh boy. We'll talk about all this good stuff. We'll be right back on the Seventh Rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Seventh Rule with Sirach, the Game Changer Lofton.
Hello.
Here are the Trivioids of the week. There were a lot. The Janai are an androgynous race. Data finds a neutrino emission with no visible source, which I thought that made me think of He Who Smelt It, Dealt It. I don't know why. There's a neutrino emission with no visible source I'm detecting. Yeah, well, then I think I know. Anyway, the Enterprise crew thinks they've found null space. Soren's flight instructor was Krite. Riker feeds Soren some pea soup. The Janai stay warm by sleeping with a friend. The taller Janai lead in a dance. The Janai love a good fight. The Janai fetuses are incubated in fibrous husks. Fiber. The Janai believe gender is primitive. Deanna Troi deals out a hand of Federation Day poker. Worf believes Federation Day poker is a woman's game. Riker gets permission to begin pre-launch sequences with Soren. Commander Riker wants to inspect Soren's variety of plant life. And a warrior does not let a friend face danger alone. All right, so I had 2 non-appearance mentions today. I got the fibrous husk, and also, what was the other one? They said husk again, and
which is actually your password, so you're gonna have to change it.
Oh yeah, no, this is my password. Was Riker like kind of whispers to himself? He's like inseminating a husk, like, and I was like. It's happened. Husks. I mean, I can't get inseminated, but
right.
Anyway,
all right.
The point is,
but I did think of
fun.
you. I have you in my notes.
Thank you.
And that there was some back and forth there that was actually funny because in that scene that you're talking about with the inseminating husk thing, the way it was being described to Riker. He mentioned he was like, sounds less enjoyable or something like that.
And Soren's like, no, bro, you got to try it. It is fucking great. I will inseminate your husk and you will come back for more. So don't cry. Right? Soren was really talking it up. Soren was saying, oh, we do all this great stuff.
Oh, no.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And Riker was like, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm down. Let's do it.
It's funny. That's exactly what was happening because he was like, "No, we like to enjoy it," and and he was like, right. Soren was like, "Just because you can't see it on my face doesn't mean just because I'm not overselling it doesn't mean it's not good." So I like that. It was some really good moments there.
Yeah. So,
but I actually
no, go ahead.
Yeah,
because I was going to turn it into a different direction.
Oh yeah, no, but I was going to say before the break that I this relationship between Riker
and Soren
and Troy.
Okay.
No, Troy. And Troy. Yeah, as soon as he hooks up with Soren, he runs over to Riker to Troy and basically is like, I got to confess. And I'm like, wait. He didn't even wait.
Does anybody really need to confess to Troy? I don't know. Because she knows. He could just walk in and she could be like, I know, Will, it's fine. And he was like, great, good talk.
It could be really quick. Well, it sounded like she knew already anyways, right? Beverly was spilling the beans earlier.
Okay.
But no, I guess my question is if Riker, for one, I like that he's honest with Troy because he kind of sat down with her and is like, look, this is what happened. I just want to let you know, are we still good? I thought it was mature, and it just shows, like I said, they have a relationship that's different than Riker hooking up with anybody else. It's just like she just is like, Riker, you can be yourself, do your thing. You know, our love is on a different vibration, and so I kind of respect that between the two of them.
Absolutely, 100%.
He even said he says, "I thought I should tell you," and then he says, "I hope nothing will change between us." And she was like, "Actually, it is going to change between us, but it's okay."
Yeah.
And I like that. I liked it. I liked that conversation.
Yeah, it was a great scene. Let me see if I remember. There were a couple little points. She says relationships are constantly changing. We'll always be friends. And then she kissed him. And again, I thought it was weird that she made out with him right after he just said, "So are we back on? What's the deal here?" So okay, I'm gonna not say that joke. I'll say that one offline. Maybe I'll say it. I was just thinking when she was there in that scene, it just kind of popped in my head that she's gonna be like, "Oh, so you like this alien race?" And he's gonna say like, "Yeah, I'm sipping on Jedi juice." Anyway, like I thought that would have been cool if they did that, but the song wasn't out yet, so that's why they didn't.
That's why they didn't do it.
Yeah, otherwise. So anyway, the point is, this is actually really good. And, joking aside, it's actually a very important episode because, looking at it through the lens of 33 years later, we know how they could have improved upon it nowadays. When we're talking gender, we're talking sexes, we're talking how people identify, we're talking pronouns, all of those things have evolved in a gigantic way since 1992. So clearly, when we're viewing it, we see a few missteps, we see a few good tries, we see a lot of things, and we see what would have been different had it been released today. But I don't know what people's views on this episode are. I don't know if some people are offended by it because they're looking at it through the lens of 2025, or if people revere it because they say, look, it wasn't a great episode in general because not a lot happened, but they tackled a really important issue and they did their best and all this kind of stuff. I really don't know. I'd love to find out in the comments below. But what I think it's always great when people try to tackle this, and Star Trek always try to tackle it way ahead of everybody else, which is awesome on their part. And I will say that there have been a few other times where I've seen similar things, like when I mentioned the Hermat, which I think was kind of a rude thing to call a race of hermaphrodites. They're just they're Hermats. Really?
Yeah.
They don't have.
That's
they're
lazy,
identified by
lazy writing.
by their bathing suit area. So
it's lazy writing.
But another thing
I
was just going to say another one that I noticed. I remember from way back in the day when I used to write fan fiction, Star Trek fan fiction, because I'm a big Star Trek dork. So I would do my research. Way back in the day, I read that Andorians actually, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, have 4 genders. And they have 2 that kind of identify more a little bit on the female spectrum, and 2 that identify more on the male spectrum, and things like that. Then you also have denobulans, and the way they identify which gender they are is like they have like the first 2 letters different. Like some are like a TH or some are an SH, or there's something like that. It was like 15, 20 years ago, so I don't remember exactly, but really interesting. Then you also have like the denobulans, only 2 genders, played by our good buddy, Mr. John Billingsley, but they have 3 wives, and the women have 3 husbands, and things like that. And I just think, it's such a necessity. If you're going to do science fiction, and every single alien week after week after week after week has 2 arms and 2 legs and 2 eyes, and it has boys and girls that we can tell which ones are boys immediately, and we can tell which ones are girls immediately, and they're all between 5 feet and 7 feet. There are no 33 feet aliens. There are no half a centimeter aliens. I mean, we got like the Nanakin in Section 31, which I thought was great, but 99% of aliens are just people with a thing, and they're all the same. They all hump the same. They all look the same and talk the same. So I think it's really cool when Star Trek gives it a shot. And so, they get an A+ for me in that regard.
Yeah, and there's other things that I liked as well as, in trying to understand each other. Riker asked about, like, well, do you guys argue like couples? Like how do you resolve conflicts? And Soren was like, no, we have conflicts. We are very opinionated.
We love a good fight.
Yeah, we love a good fight. Just so this is about learning somebody, right? You're like, oh, you're weird because you're like this, and they're like, no, I'm not weird. I do the same thing that you do, right? We argue, like, who leads in a dance, though? Like, the taller person, like it, the answers, the comebacks, cultural comebacks of just how this particular Janai, how their society functions. I thought that was great. The exchange between them, it was informing Riker, like, some of your preconceived notions about what identifies, a healthy functioning gender spectrum, I guess, or whatever
Right.
you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's predicated upon who leads in a dance, like that's not that.
That's what I'm saying. That is such a 1992 line. That is a 1992 line if I ever heard one.
That's not that advanced of a thinking, right? Like, who's gonna dance though?
Yeah, well, how do you pick your shoes, man? This is confusing.
It's like, I was like, all right, Riker, that's the best you can come up with. But the one thing I did like what he revealed was, the question I thought was the most revealing was, "What's your type?" Like, because we've kind of had the discussion throughout the years of reviewing this show, like, what is Riker's type? And Riker identifies his type in this episode. He's like, I like a woman who's intelligent,
Mm-hmm.
sure of herself,
Mm-hmm.
somebody I can talk with and get something back, right? So he wants some talk back.
He wants
some
pressure. Beverly pops in. She's like, "Oh, well, if I'd known, I'd still say no."
And then this is why Riker is the smoothest, most scoringest character on Star Trek, is because he says, and the most important thing, and he gets all serious, is you got to laugh at my jokes.
Yeah.
And then she laughs, right?
Yes, she does.
That's when Riker strikes again.
And I submit that Soren, being the very intelligent Janai that she is, didn't think that joke was that funny. But that Riker said the most important thing to Hump and me is you got to laugh at my dumb jokes. And so Soren was like, ha 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 ha.
Laughing. This is me laughing.
Here we go. What a riot.
Yeah. That was great. But the one thing that, so then comes the persecution, and Riker realizes that his probe has got her in trouble, and she's about to and she's about to get hauled away to this psychiatric thing, right? And you can feel Riker feels bad. He's like, damn, this hookup is about to cause this person torturous pain or whatever it is, right?
And suddenly, by the way, as with every 42-minute episode, Riker suddenly loves Soren.
Yes.
Not just like, oh man, I feel bad. Soren was really cool. It's like, oh, but I love Soren. I'm in okay.
Yeah. Yes. But I love her, Captain. And Captain's like, yeah, all right, look,
Yeah.
Don't risk your career.
Yeah. All right.
Don't risk your career over.
The fourth time you fell in love this week. All right. Cool. Great.
And then Picard, I thought was great in this episode. Picard's like, look, I can't defend you on this one. You know,
That's good.
he was like, and then he tells him, he's like, well, don't put at risk everything you've worked for. You know, like you're don't go fucking
Chasing
Rambo.
waterfalls. Yeah.
Yeah, stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to.
Yeah.
And then Riker gets all attitudey and he's like, may I be dismissed? And Picard's like, yeah, all right. And then I thought Picard had another great moment at the end.
It was such a sweet moment. That was beautiful.
Yes.
You're talking about when he says, you know, hey, we're being called out to go to the Phelon system, and the way Patrick Stewart played it was like delicate, friendly. It was actually really good. And he basically says, I didn't know when I could say that we were going to be there until I knew is that if our business is finished here, something like that. You know, he says, finished, sir. And he says, very well, kind of quietly. That was beautiful. Yeah, I agree. It was a beautiful moment.
It was a beautiful moment because he saw his buddy go fly off the handle, and he's like, "Man, I get it, but you know, I can't co-sign this. What do you want me to do? You fell in love, you know, the Federation can't co-sign." He's like, "But you can do what you want to do on your own time. I'll look the other way about it, though. You know, whatever. You know." And then I thought Worf also did a great thing just by stepping up and saying, I know what's going on, and I can't let my friend go into danger alone.
By the way, that was
risking his own, you know, rank in at the Federation.
And it was a double because it also gave Worf's character a nice little character arc within the episode. Because if you'll recall, during the poker game, when he's like, chick game, weak hands, women are wimps. And Beverly's like, geez, after I was done telling them that, you know, we're so evolved. Of course, he's a Klingon, so she can only speak for humans, but whatever. And then he was saying the Janai, they don't make me, I feel uncomfortable around them, or I don't remember exactly how he said it, but he said, they make me feel uncomfortable, or they're weird, or I don't like them. He says, the Janai, they bother me. That's what he says. They bother me. So he's on the bigoted side of this episode. And so when he does this kind of half turnaround for Riker, it means more, because he's saying like, all right, I'm not going to be that guy. Instead, I'm going to be that guy. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna support my friend, and he needs a buddy right now. So I thought that was good, but really Picard handled it great when he says, "Is our business with the Janai finished?" The way he asked that, it was very sensitive to what was going on, and the closeout look on Riker's face, where they kind of pan into him and you see the look of, you know, like the loss that he feels. I thought it was a great performance in that look that he gave on the closeout.
You know, I got to point out, we only have a few minutes left here, but there were a lot of moments here, and this is why this is actually a really good episode, is because they attempt to tackle certain issues, and they say certain things well ahead of their time. But also it was light and funny, and while I was watching, I just kept laughing because, you know, Riker is just so Riker. Like when Soren expresses her feelings for him and says, but with you, you know, we're not supposed to do this, blah, 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 blah. But with you, I can be honest. And then he's about to say something, and Soren says, don't say anything. Just think about it. And it pops up. I'm thinking like Riker's thinking like, hey, I've been thinking about it since you showed up. You don't need to tell me to think about it. I haven't stopped thinking about it since the moment you waltzed into that, you know, mess hall or whatever. Good old Riker.
He's been thinking about it.
It is time for today's home run of the episode, Sirach Lofton. Who gets the home run of the episode today?
This episode home run for me is going to be um, Jonathan Frakes as Riker. I thought he was really good. I just there's really good moments that he played there. For me, I really like the moment where he interrupts in the court proceedings, and they're like, "This is a closed proceeding," and he's like, "Yeah, it looks like I opened it. You know, it looks like
Yeah.
I opened it, or something to that
And your
effect,
guards
right?"
didn't stop me, the ones that are like standing right there.
Yeah. So, but then he comes and he's essentially giving an out for this character Soren and saying, "Look, it's all on me." And to me, that was a nice move, a well performed, but just a nice move. The sensual, soft scenes were great between him. I love the moments in the shuttlecraft when he was being asked, tell me about your sexual organs. His reaction had me laughing. I had to rewind that a few times. There were other moments that I had to kind of look back a few times because his facials were really great.
What?
And then what? No, his facial reactions were very great, and yeah, I just feel like Jonathan Frakes really did a hell of a job in this performance-wise. Um, he hit all the notes, and that's what I think deserves the home run.
Mm-hmm. You know, I surprisingly actually think it is the actress that played Soren. Her name is Melinda Kulia. I just say surprisingly because it surprised me. I didn't expect it when I first saw the episode playing.
Yeah.
She seemed a little stiff, but that's, people trying to portray something androgynous kind of without the male isms or the female isms, things like that. But as the episode progressed, I saw the actress really was able to show a lot of emotion without showing a lot of emotion, like how Vulcan actors do, or actors that portray Vulcans, I should say. And I thought she was actually really good. I was very happy with her. So she gets the home
100%.
run of the day for me. Melinda
Especially
Kulia.
in that last moment there where she
Yes,
goes back into like
that was sad.
yeah, when he says to her, "I love you," and she says, "I'm sorry." Ugh, I
Oof.
felt that hurt me.
That's worse than Star Wars. I love you, I know. I also want to point out very quickly the actress that played, I believe, the judge. What
yeah.
was it? Noor. Actually, the name was Noor, Noor, like Dr. Muhammad Noor, is the same actress named Megan Cole, who played Senator Kretak for a couple episodes of Deep Space Nine, the Romulan lady that in the 7th season that was kind of working with the Federation, working with Cisco. Really great actress. So I think that role maybe helped her to land the bigger role in Deep Space Nine later.
I
And
hated her in
also,
this episode, so she did a good job.
yeah, and also we had another Ensign Gates sighting, the red shirt, at the helm. We hadn't seen her in a while. It's nice to see her. But anyway, here are some other people that are going to be nice to see as well. Their names are Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman, Tom, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Titus Moeller, Dr. Mohammed Noor, the aforementioned, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Goo, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, aka Crewman Guy, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manosfi, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Chris Sternick, Greg K. Wickstrom, Cassandra Gerard, Chuck A., Chris Garrison, of course, Jason M. Oken. We've got the free-for-all up next. We will be right back on the 7th Rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the 7th Rule with Sirach Loft, and this is the free-for-all with Melissa Longo.
Hello. Look at my shirt. It says the 7th Rule. Hello.
Excellent. And Jason M. Oken as well. There he is. Cassandra Gerard has a Michael Burnham shirt. Allison Leach Hyde with one of the original Ferengi Eyes shirts is here out in New Mexico. TJ Jackson Bay is on the bridge of the Enterprise D. Faith Howell, oh, cool. She's got a Chat Pack shirt. That's an old school one. That's great. Also on the bridge of the Enterprise D. Chris Garris is here. He's going to teach us some stuff from Southeast Texas. Carrie Schwent, you can call her Crafty Bear, is also here. Chuck A is a TNG fanatic with cool stuff in his background and a Picard head. And Chris McGee is the Dark Lord. Be careful. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
I think it might be like around a 7-1.
Does anybody else have any guesses as to what the IMDb score is without having checked?
6.7.
I put it as a 7.8, maybe just because of the whole message around the show, but I put it as 7.8. So
7.3.
6.9. Not reflective of how I feel about it.
It looks like all bets are in. The correct answer is 6.8. I wonder if that one is going up through the years or coming down through the years. Because it's interesting. Sometimes episodes tend to be viewed better and better as time goes on, and others worse. Did we get any non-appearance mentions besides myself?
Two, at least.
Fibrous Husk.
Two at least.
What did you get, Melissa?
I saw that too. Well, Luoxana Troy. Because she's the one who gave Deanna the suitcase full of items from her father. And then
did she say like my mom?
My mom.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
She said my mother. Yeah. And then Riker mentioned his father with the split pea soup. Because it was his recipe.
Did Troy also mention her father?
Yes.
There we go.
I did.
Cool.
Yeah.
What's his name? Ian, I think?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Thanks, Melissa. Any some kinds of or some sorts of Chris McGee?
No, there wasn't all that much of a mystery in this episode, at least not for long, so no, none in this episode.
All right. But they had some kind of sex, am I right? So, Melissa, will you please get us started off on the right track and tell us what you thought of this episode?
Bow, chicka, bow, bow. I thought it was heartbreaking. For the most obvious reason, the Crafty Bear says split pea soup is gross. But anyway, I found myself and I'm surprised that it did get such a low rating because of the groundbreaking subject matter that it touched upon. And yes, people can get into nitpicks as to how it was approached. But in 1992, we still didn't have the language to tackle these kinds of subject matters, and them just attempting to go in and navigate this subject of gender identity and LGBTQIA plus subject matter. It is. I mean, gosh, it is groundbreaking and so eye-opening. And I found myself, tears were brought to my eyes during the courtroom case when Soren was saying, why do you get to dictate who we are allowed to love? And it breaks my heart that so many people in this world aren't allowed to be who they are, and they're targeted for it and bullied for it. And it breaks my heart because they aren't harming anyone. I'm lucky because I was born as a female and I'm glad to be a female, but I can only imagine the pain that somebody goes through who feels that they were, born differently. And I'm apologies if I don't say these things as eloquently as I could, because I too am still learning. It, but yeah, it was, yeah, it's that's all I can say about that. But I also want to mention this scene here between Troy and Riker, and because I think it's one of the scenes that encapsulates their relationship the best and the most honest, because their friendship is, and their relationship and their connection is so deep that he can go to her and say, look, I've met this person that I feel this connection with, and she receives it, and there is a visible hint of, but her saying, yeah, we're still friends, we're always friends, we'll always have that connection, is so important. And I love that about their relationship, and I love that they do end up together because their connection is deep. But I love Troy and I love Riker together. I think they make a great fit. They're a great team.
However, no spoils here. We don't know if Riker and Troy end up together.
Oh, right.
In Picard season. No, of course, everybody knows. Thank you very much, Melissa Longo. Great stuff as always. Jason M. Oken. What's up, Jason? What do you think?
Well, this, certainly, kudos basically to the to Starship for trying to tackle something like this. As Melissa said, it's not something that was prevalent, certainly in the early 90s. And even to attempt subject, to tell that kind of a story was, courageous in many different ways. It certainly stands out from everything else that was done around it. Now you can, the qualms with how it was done. I think in terms of how this episode aged over time, I don't think it aged as well as many of the others, and perhaps the score has gone down over the years because of that. I think some of the dialogue, not necessarily sort of Soren speech, because I think that's important. The courtroom scene is important. That sort of is the heart of the episode. But I think sort of the human sort of expression as to what sexes are like and where we are, I think it's very quintessentially 90s. And I don't think that aged particularly well. I think, frankly, the episode is a little slow. I'm not sure it was shot all that well. And the Act 3 technobabble Jeopardy that didn't seem like Jeopardy dragged the episode down for me. I think, that this could have been done a little bit differently. It looked, frankly, a little cheap. And I can talk about a lot of that later. I think, the primary thing here is to attempt the subject matter and to basically tell a story that certainly back in the day, people didn't speak out loud. I mean, being in the closet was a real thing. And sort of coming out and doing these things was, frankly, dangerous to some people. And that is something that I think maybe is harder to appreciate for people 30 years later. But it was very important then. So, certainly a tip of the hat for me for doing that. As an episode, maybe not the most entertaining or fast paced, but for the subject matter, high marks.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff, as always. Thank you very much, Jason M. Oken. All right, Cassandra Gerard, number one Michael Burnham fan. Just check her shirt. What do you think of this one?
I have always liked this episode. I mean, I am a TNG fan in general, but I love this because I think growing up, at least in my first few years of my life in a big city, so I was on the New York trains and subways, and you saw and heard everything. And I was very inquisitive. Why is this guy dressed like this? And, and what's going on? And I had a Tootsie album and, and it's just so learning about other people, their lifestyles. I didn't fully understand it, but I had a little bit of exposure to it. So by the time this episode came around, I was like, wow, they're using pronouns. And I mean, only until probably like maybe 10 years ago did I start hearing about people using pronouns instead of he or she. And I thought that was Star Trek, once again, way ahead of its time in discussing these type of topics. And I love that throughout the episode, everyone talked about their differences in a very respectful manner. It was like, oh, you wear this, you have color, and you have your hair in elaborate hairstyles. And, I like that. And I thought, wow, like, I wonder if the world in general would go about embracing other cultures in the same manner. Where would we be? So I like that. And also, I thought was really funny is when she caught Riker totally off guard. Riker always has like a magic Joker card in his pocket. And when she asked him about the sex with humans, it was just like, whoa, I don't even know how to answer that right now. So I thought that was funny, but and I also liked when they showed other views, right? They showed Worf, and as we view it, his sexist attitudes regarding gender and everything. But I didn't feel offended by it because I'm like, no, they should show everyone and how they feel about certain things. And so and that's why I gave it a 7.8. I'm like, this is great. Yeah.
Totally. Thank you very much, Cassandra Gerard. Coolest name on the show ever. Allison Leach Hyde also has a cool name. Out in New Mexico, what did you think of this one?
I too have always liked this episode. And I know I talk a lot about when I first saw most of these Next Generation shows. I was in North Dakota and I'd see them during the day on syndication. This was not one they skipped. They showed this episode. And I always find that interesting because North Dakota tends to be more conservative. And on this rewatch, I'm like, oh, this is why they show this episode is they see the Janai as, and they're holding down individuality. Everyone needs to be the same. That's what they're kind of showing in this. And that's very frowned upon in most conservative areas is everyone is an individual and you can't stop me from being my individual. And that's why I think I got to see this one fairly frequently as a child. So I think that's really interesting of where in the 90s, depending on where you lived, what they saw in this episode. Because, again, being from a fairly conservative state, it wasn't seen as we're talking about people who have different sexuality or different gender identities. They're just seeing it as identity of I am who I am. And we are all sad that she is no longer who she was because she was, a very inquisitive and fun person who wanted to know all these things about somebody else and how they lived and were. And we have that just sadness when Riker and Worf go to take her back and she's not who she was. And I also think that's a really interesting statement because we had so many of those I've just lost the words on it. All those camps to stop gay children from being gay, conversion camps and things like that. And so like here is Star Trek in the early 90s saying, this is wrong. We shouldn't change people from who they truly are to something society says they should be. So that's what I really like about this episode. And I think everyone did a wonderful job of portraying this. When Soren is doing her speech, it is beautiful. And I get teary-eyed on that. And then teary-eyed when we see she's not her anymore. So I do. I still really like this episode.
I just got a little bit smarter. Thanks very much, Allison Leach Hyde. Also, Earrings game is always on point there. TJ Jackson Bay is out in Missouri. He agrees. What'd you think of this one?
I also think that those earrings are awesome, and she's always on point. I really appreciate this episode because I've watched it over the years. I find that I'm very much a different person than I was when I first saw it, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the message that this episode shares. a couple of lines that really stood out to me in this episode, and one is in the conversation behind Melissa between Riker and Troy, when Riker is asking her, is this going to change things between her and you expect her to be like, no, everything's fine, but she says yes, relationships are constantly changing, and I just think that is such a profoundly true thing, and that we do have that expectation for things not changing, especially, in our friendships and our family relationships. We want it to stay the same. We want it to be, what the thing that we love and felt comfortable in. But the truth is that she said is both people are constantly growing. What she did to reassure him is said that even though that's true, we'll not grow apart because our bond is so tight. And so, I think that is just a much healthier way of looking at any type of relationship. Recognize that person is going to change. I mean, I hope so. I hope that I'm not the same person that I was 10 minutes ago or 5 minutes or 5 years ago, or, anything like that. But I also do hope that, the bonds that I create are as strong as theirs, no matter who they're with. The other line that really stood out to me was in the courtroom scene. Soren said, "I was born this way." And that is a statement, that we also, have heard in our society that some people tend to try to dispute for some reason. I'm not sure. And whether or not it's true doesn't matter. What matters is, to me personally, respecting who they've chosen to be. We just talked about how people grow and change. So whether or not someone was born that way does not matter. The fact that they've chosen to be that and that's who they've grown into does. Allison touched on this kind of idea of a society where they want everybody to be the same. And may I never live in a society like that, not because of its repressive nature, but it would just be boring if everyone was the same and there was no difference to explore. And I think that Soren exemplified that excellently, because as soon as she was out of that environment, her curiosity was sparked, and she had all of these questions about this thing that's so different from anything that she's ever seen on her world. And that said, I want to give a shout out to the actor that played Soren, and I don't know how to pronounce her last name, so I hope I get as close to right as I can. And it's Linda Culia. And I just want to give a shout out because I think that such a wonderful job was done in portraying, this character. I really appreciate it. The courtroom scene, but also the scene in the shuttle where she's kind of coming out to Riker. And she really, really expresses who she is, what she's been through, the experiences that she had that scared her into repressing who she is. And I just think that was the most honest scene, ever. And that it was very well portrayed. It touched my heart. A couple more points. The wink and nod, kind of thing between Riker and Picard, I thought also speaks to how we face this subject and a lot of others in society, where we think we just got to be hush hush, when really, if we just come out and have an open, honest conversation about it, which we saw in the poker scene, and where, yes, Worf, we might not agree with his view, or we might, but the thing is, they were having an open discussion about it, and they weren't too shy to talk about it. And even though he felt that way, he didn't seem closed off or not open to listening to what someone else had to say about it. And so, while I might not have agreed with what his view was, I do agree with the fact that he was open to sharing it, and he didn't seem like he wanted to push that onto the other people and say, you people should think the way that I do too, because that's the same thing as everyone should be the same, and that's boring. Lastly, I kind of want to leave on a sad note that can also be funny. And I think this is just the worst response ever to "I love you" is "I'm sorry." Like that's the worst response ever. I felt bad for Riker. We had to stand there, and that's the response that he got. But it's the worst response ever to "I love you."
It's pretty bad.
It's just below, I know.
That's what I told Sarag. I was like, that's even worse than the Star Wars one. Well, thanks very much, TJ Jackson Bay. Awesome stuff. Faith Howell, Out in the Enterprise D. What did you think of this one? Did you love it?
Well, I mean, we know season 5 is the best, but yes, long story short, this has always been one of my favorites. I may have said before that I feel like Next Gen definitely was formative in how I see the world, how I relate to the world, and sort of my sense of morality. When I say that, this is the episode that's forefront in my head when I'm speaking that. So I feel like definitely I saw this the first time when it aired. I was about 6. Obviously, a lot of this was lost to me at that time. So it's hitting a little different watching it for this recording. I do still really appreciate all the things that they did. I also really loved the scenes with Deanna and Riker. But one of the things that I really appreciated watching it this time was that sort of iconic sci-fi strength where they set up a situation where I, as a cisgendered heterosexual woman, can see myself in this character 100%, right? She is me. She is being persecuted for being like me. And so it does, in my mind, what sci-fi always does best. It allows people who need to get the message to see it and assimilate it in a way that doesn't attack, doesn't hurt feelings, doesn't put me on the defensive. And I think, I got it at a really young age, but hopefully, people are still seeing this episode and having these thoughts and having these conversations, because I think, it's still relevant, whether or not you think it's handled in a modern way or not. I think it's still valid. And so, yes, all around, I really appreciate this episode and still think it's great. I give it a 10. I am so disappointed at that rating on IMDb. So
there's still time to fix it, everybody. Thank you very much, Faith Howell, on the bridge of the Enterprise D. Chris Garris, out in Southeast Texas. What did you think of this episode? Was it your first time?
No, not my first time. But, I was 15 when this aired in 1992. And back then, the themes for this show went right over my head. With living in a small town in South Texas, honestly, this topic was foreign. It's not something that friends really talked about or anything like that. And then something that Cassandra said, with her living in a big city, man, she actually was exposed to different culture. I mean, we had different cultures, but not so many different cultures. Everybody down here kind of, acted and looked the same and talked the same. So yeah, this episode just didn't really hit me then. But now, 33 years later, yeah, this episode is very relevant and it resonates. It's just everything it's talking about is something we're dealing with today at this minute with gender identity, individuality, and social acceptance. So yeah, it's, in my opinion, this episode I feel has actually aged well because it is talking about everything that people are having to deal with today. I mean, I'll be honest. First person I thought about was Mai when I was watching this. She has to deal with this stuff, or did, or on a regular basis. So, yeah, it yeah, it definitely has opened my eyes, and I really could see how. I mean, 33 years later, 33 years ago, they were trying to write about this, and it really didn't. They just couldn't really get the message out. But I mean, how is it even possible that it just hits so hard now? In this society that we're dealing with. So, yeah, I did feel bad for Riker. I was also a little sometimes confused with some of his actions. And it was funny every now and then when she was like, "So what do your genitals look like?" I'm not gonna lie, he was a little caught off guard by that. Um, for once, someone's actually hitting on him instead of him doing the hitting. So, and so, but yeah, overall, like I said, this is a good episode that I think fits very well in today's society and the stories.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Mr. Chris Garris. Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear. Cool shirt, cool background. What do you got for us today?
Yeah, I love this episode. I think I've only ever seen it like once or twice before, so I remembered it sort of vaguely, but hadn't really dove too far into it. And yeah, I've got a bunch of notes. I'm always worried about stumbling in this subject in particular. I worry about, so if I accidentally say something wrong, anybody out there, I humbly apologize. Our good friend Mai has assured me that I will do just fine. But if I look down at my notes a lot, that's why. But I love it's a very moving episode, and Eric and I both noted a lot of the scene. There are several scenes like her and Soren and Riker eating that gross split pea soup. The scenes in the shuttlecraft. Her scene at the end. They were all allowed to breathe. There was almost no background like sounds at all. No music. They were just allowed to breathe, and I really enjoyed that. And yeah, in doing some research for the episode, I found Frakes really wanted Soren to be played by a man. And I respect the hell out of him for that. I'm sad that they weren't able to do that, but given the time, they probably would have been allowed to air it if it had been. But I love what is sort of like I think of like the twist of the episode, making the heterosexuality the shunned behavior and the behavior that's not normal. I like that as a way of telling that story. So I think more people were able to understand it a little bit better. And yeah, the scene with Worf, it makes me laugh, but it also warms my heart a little bit because it makes him helping Riker at the end of the episode. Like, I know what you're about to do. I'm going with you. I got your back. That warmed my heart. And then of course the tear prick moment once he gets back onto the ship afterwards with Jean-Luc saying it without saying it, like, are we done? Are we okay to go? And when Riker says, yeah, just his soft tone, like, okay, let's go. That gives the tear pricks. And like Chris, I was very amused to see Riker being the one receiving of the attentions this time. And I think if I remember correctly, I think it's only ever happened 2 other times with the Angel One chick and the Irish chick who wanted her feet washed.
Yeah.
So it's always fun seeing Riker being on the other end of that. And I will not even attempt to pronounce her Melinda's last name because I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it either. But when I looked up her IMDb, I've never really watched it, but she is AAA Amy Allen from the first 2 seasons of the A-Team. She did apparently 24
Cool.
episodes of it. And I looked up a couple clips of it, and her character looks like she'd be a lot of fun. I think I might have to watch that show at some point, because of course it's got Dwight Schultz, Berkeley, and I love that guy. Yeah, and something else that I didn't realize. You've got your first female kiss online was, or on TV, was in 1991 on LA Law, I believe it was, according to the website that I found. We don't get a male kiss until 1999. And we've got sort of Jadzia and Garrick, but we don't get an openly gay character until Discovery in 2017 with my favorite couple in the entire Star Trek universe, Stamets and Culber. They had my heart, and I told this to Wilson Cruz on the Star Trek cruise, that couple had my heart when just simple they're at the end of the day, they're standing there brushing their teeth, talking about their day. I loved them immediately after that scene. And one final thing before I get to the limerick, it'll sort of work my way into it, but like Faith, I'm a straight cisgendered woman. A lot of those terms are still new to me, and I do stumble occasionally. The they them pronouns, I do accidentally slip a couple of times. When I do, I apologize afterwards. Riker, that scene in 10 Forward in particular, I love the way he asks Thorin the questions like, "Hey, how oh wait, no, it wasn't in 10 Forward, it was in the shuttlecraft. Never mind." But the questions he asks her, I like the way he asked her. It wasn't condescending. He was genuinely curious. And props to Jerry Taylor for writing just a fantastic episode. But I love with my background. I really wanted that because I am not a member of, and I'm going to use air quotes for anyone listening, of the rainbow, but I am an ally of the rainbow. And our good friend Mai has assured me that anyone who is a proud and true ally, and this is a quote from her, is also part of that rainbow. Because after all, we are all human beings, members of the human race. So thank you, Mai, for the assistance. I've been consulting with her the last couple of days over some things, so I don't misstep. And she actually helped me out a little bit with the limerick. So thank you, Mai, live in Tokyo, for the assistance. I will finish there. We need to open our minds a bit more. Why care what they do behind our door? We all wish for the same things, the highs and lows that life brings. Deep down, we are all the same at our core. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear. All right, Chuck A, aka TNG Fanatic. Everybody knows. What do you think of this one?
I really liked the episode this viewing. I had seen it a couple, 2 or 3 times before, and I was always had a mixed feelings about the episode. The subject matter was, is very pertinent to what we have today, and I thought that was really good to see them do that subject back in 1992. I did recognize the voice of the character that played Noor. That name sounds familiar for some reason. I'm looking at my phone here. The actress name was Megan Cole, and I recognized her voice. She was in Deep Space Nine as the Romulan Senator Freetech, and she was in 2 different DS9 7-season episodes. I recognized the voice right away. She did a limited role in this episode, but she did such a good job, a more expanded role in DS9 for those 2 episodes. I thought this been mentioned that the scene in the shuttlecraft was just wonderful, and then the scene at the end where you could see that Soren's been counseled and changed, and Riker was trying to get her to show her feelings back to him again. Excellent, well done scenes. So overall, like I said, I enjoyed the episode more and more since the earlier viewings of the episode quite a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Chuck A. Episodes like this remind us exactly why you are a TNG fanatic. Thank you for that. The Dark Lord, Chris McGee, is here. He's going to teach us some stuff. What'd you think of this one?
Oh, you bet. First, I think it goes without saying that I concur with everyone else and echo each of their thoughts. I'll try to minimize repeating what they've already said, and so much better than I ever could. When I first saw this episode many years ago, I thought it was great. Brilliant, even. Now, I don't think it's great. I think it is necessary, even if only for Soren's speech near the end. As Chris Garris said, this is one of the few episodes that is more relevant now than when it first aired, by an order of magnitude at least. As has been said by everyone, the A-plot of the story is clearly a thinly veiled mirror on our own society, something science fiction, Star Trek excel at, specifically the treatment of members of the LGBT community by today's American society. After all, this show was produced in the United States, so the stories it tells often primarily target American audiences. Now, I have more to say on this topic, as I'm sure we all do, but I think it might be better left for things left unsaid, among other topics I'll bring up there. As we've discussed many times before, any episode that tries to build a blossoming love story in 42 minutes will always struggle to do so convincingly. I think this episode accomplishes that feat better than most, but in my opinion, it was kind of doomed to failure by casting Riker, the one character on the show that has been built up over the last 4 years as a womanizer, to be the character in our main cast who falls in love. I think it would have made much more sense to me, anyway, to see Geordi in this role, or Beverly, anyone but Riker. I thought the actress playing Soren, Melinda Kalea, did a phenomenal job. And on the HD version of the episode, you can see tears rolling down her cheeks as she recounts the story of her classmate to Riker. And of course, during her monologue near the end, which was incredibly well written and delivered. This is the first episode where Geordi is growing a beard. I can't wait for Sirach to see it grow throughout the rest of the series and tell us what he thinks. For a man who claims to be hopelessly in love with Soren, Riker certainly, in my opinion, didn't try too hard to rescue her as she was being dragged away near the end. I always pictured Riker as more of a man of action than a man of diplomacy. Maybe he's changed over the years, of course. Maybe he was worried about damaging the Federation's relationship with the Janai, but that would imply that his love for Soren isn't as deep as his devotion to duty, thus reinforcing the audience's disbelief that Riker could fall in love. For the memorable quote of the episode, there were quite a few, but I have got to repeat the one that's absolutely bears repeating that Melissa had alluded to earlier. What makes you think you can dictate how people love each other?
Great stuff as always. Thank you very much. Chris McGee, that's the Dark Lord to you. Jake Sisko, sorry, Jake's final take, not Jake Sisko, Jake's final take. Any final thoughts on this, Sirach?
Yeah, I mean, she was the sight for Soren eyes. Yeah, you know, there was a feeling of helplessness there that I sensed when Picard was saying, "Look, there's really nothing we can do as far as, you know, that's what they do." And I think that's one of the things that loomed over the episodes was that feeling that there's nothing you can do about this situation. I think, the only thing that could be done, which was what Soren actually chose to do at the end, which was the courageous act of speaking out for the benefit of others that may be listening so that change could eventually come. And perhaps some people's minds were convinced that, through that speech, that they were in the wrong. But other than that, that was the protest, that moment there, which I thought was very courageous on Soren's part because Riker was giving her an out. He was saying, "Look, it's not her fault. It's totally me. I came onto her." He was basically giving her an out to say, "Yeah, no, I was taken advantage of by this man." And I thought that the idea of standing on the principle of what she believes was one of the big takeaways for me. Like, I'm willing to suffer the consequence of whatever the repercussion of my actions are going to be. And as long as I have the opportunity to speak my voice and say what is true for me in this moment. And I thought the truth for her mattered more than the consequences of whatever that was going to be. And I think that's a big lesson to be learned about the value of standing on principle and the courage it takes to stand up against, the status quo. The other thing that I noticed too was the option that Riker was offering that the Enterprise could offer a protection, an asylum, right? And what that essentially does is it saves one person, but doesn't change the idea. It doesn't change the way it is. And so, yeah, even though that could have possibly been an option, and that Soren could have, had asylum on the ship, the other people who are there, who are Janai, are going to still have to, repeatedly endure being repressed and oppressed for whatever they feel is their true feelings. So I thought that all in all, like, the message was about speaking out about what is true for you, about how the freedom to love is so important as an idea. Um, and I really enjoyed all of those moments. I did feel a certain sense of sadness about how quick the transition process was to get her back under the spell of whatever the mass hypnosis was. And I felt like that was kind of shocking to me. Like, wow, that was quick. I thought it would require a lot of, treatment, but the torture of the psychotactic treatment also sounded abusive, as we've heard with conversion therapy and other kinds of forms of shock therapy and whatever other stupid things they've come up with to cure people. And the other thing was, I think that this episode showed again the camaraderie and friendship that the crew has with each other. Picard was kind of looking out for Riker, like, man, I'll look the other way if I can on certain things, but certain things I can't help you with. But you're a good guy, and don't risk it all. Don't jump out the window. So that was their relationship, and then you saw Worf's relationship stand up, and you saw Crusher kind of her sensibilities of picking up on the vibes on things, and I just like the whole chemistry with each other that I felt in this episode too. How everybody was kind of there for each other. Troy, obviously, being there for Riker in when he needed somebody to talk to. So all in all, I really enjoyed this episode. I think it deserves a higher rating. It did. There were moments that pace wise, I think could have been sped up a little bit, but the guest star Melinda did a fantastic job, I thought, in her performance. Particularly the look of emptiness in her face when she saw Riker at the end. I thought that was amazing. Like, it was almost like I don't really even know you that well, and you completely, the switch was there, and I thought, wow, that's a great acting job for her. So, yeah, I enjoyed it.
Well, that's it for us, everybody. Good episode. Great review. Good stuff. Thank you very much. Chris McGee, Chuck A., Carrie Schwent, Chris Garris, Faith Howell, TJ, Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Allison Leach Hyde, Cassandra Gerard, Jason M. Oken, Melissa Longo, for myself, Melissa Sirach, and Mr. Aaron Eisenberg. Thank you all very much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. We hope to see you next time. And until then, always remember the 7th rule.